Don't expect a dime from Dad's 101 million, my son, James, hissed at me outside the heavy oak doors of the lawyer's office. His voice was sharp, his eyes cold, as though I were some beggar waiting to snatch crumbs from his table. I remember how his lips curled into a smirk, the same smirk he had when he was a little boy and thought he'd won some game. My heart squeezed painfully, not because of the money. I had never been one to chase wealth, but because of the cruel way my own child spoke to me. But then the lawyer, Mr. Whitman, cleared his throat and began reading aloud. To my beloved wife, I swear, I saw James's face turn ghostly white in that instant, as if all the blood drained out of him. His jaw slackened, his confident smirk evaporating, and his hands trembled slightly on the polished mahogany table. I sat still, clutching the handle of my old leather purse, trying to steady my breath. What on earth was coming next? The room was dead silent, every ear straining for the next words. And that was the moment, the exact second, I realized life as I knew it was about to change forever. But let me take you back. Because the story of how we ended up in that suffocating office in downtown Houston, waiting to hear the final words of my husband's will, began years earlier. Long before James's bitterness, before Jacob's fortune, and before betrayal turned my world upside down. I was 65 years old that summer. With silver hair I tied neatly into a bun each morning, those stray strands always found their way to frame my face. People in our neighborhood often said I looked younger than my age, though the wrinkles around my eyes betrayed the years of worry and quiet sacrifices. Jacob and I had been married for 42 years. We met in Austin when I was barely 21, working as a waitress in a small diner off Congress Avenue. He had walked in one rainy afternoon in his press shirt and confident stride, a man already dreaming bigger than the rest of us could imagine. He ordered a slice of pecan pie and a coffee, black, and before I knew it, he was showing up every evening just to sit in my section. He was ambitious, sometimes too ambitious, but he was charming and kind. When he proposed under the live oaks in Zilker Park, I didn't hesitate. We built a life together. He worked endless hours, first at a small construction company, later creating his own business, while I held the home together and raised James. James, our only child, was born on a hot July morning. I thought he was perfect, tiny fists, wide eyes, a cry that could rattle the windows. But raising him was never easy. He had Jacob's ambition but little of his patience. Even as a boy, he wanted the best toys, the best clothes, the best everything. And when he didn't get them, he sulked or shouted. I often tried to temper him with lessons of kindness, but it rarely stuck. Still, I loved him with all my heart. What mother doesn't? Our life changed the year Jacob's company struck gold with a massive development project in Dallas. The deals kept rolling in after that: land, hotels, and even a small chain of resorts. By the time Jacob turned 60, he was worth more than I could fathom. People whispered numbers, and I pretended not to hear. I didn't care about millions. I cared about dinners together, about laughter filling our home. But as the money grew, so did the distance. Jacob traveled more, worked late, missed birthdays and anniversaries. When I asked him to slow down, he brushed me off. Just a few more years, Jane, and then we can rest. James, however, basked in the wealth. He bragged to his friends, demanded more, lived beyond his means even before he had a steady career. I worried, but Jacob often indulged him. "He's our boy," Jacob would say. "He'll find his way." Except he didn't. By the time James was 35, he had already burned through 2 failed businesses, both funded by his father. He was married and divorced within 5 years, leaving behind bitterness and unpaid debts. When I tried to talk to him about responsibility, he would snap. "You never had to earn money, Mom. Dad did it all. What do you know about work?" Those words stung deeper than he could have imagined. Then came the sickness. Jacob was 72 when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The news hit me like a thunderclap on a clear day. I thought we had more time, thought we would finally share the slow mornings we always dreamed of. Instead, hospital visits, treatments, and endless consultations filled our days. I stayed by his side through it all, holding his hand, spooning him soup when he couldn't eat, and whispering prayers when he slept. James, however, visited less often. "It's too hard to see him like this," he said once over the phone. But I knew the truth. He couldn't stand to see his father frail, not the strong man who had always bailed him out. One evening, when the pain was too much, Jacob pulled me close. His voice was weak, but his eyes still carried that spark I'd known for decades. "Jane," he whispered, "promise me you'll be strong. People show their true colors when money is involved. Don't let anyone, not even James, push you aside." Tears filled my eyes as I kissed his forehead. "I promise." A month later, Jacob was gone. The days after his death were a blur. The house was filled with flowers, casseroles, and well-meaning neighbors who tried to comfort me. James handled arrangements, though his tone with me was curt, businesslike. When the letter from Mr. Whitman, the lawyer, arrived, summoning us to hear the will, James's eyes gleamed with something I couldn't name, but recognized all too well: greed. And so, there I was, sitting in that stiff-backed chair, still grieving my husband while my son leaned close to spit venom in my ear. "Don't expect a dime from Dad's 101 million. His words sliced through me, but I said nothing. Instead, I held my purse tighter, prayed for strength, and lifted my chin. Then Mr. Whitman began reading, "To my beloved wife." And in that moment, James's world and mine shifted forever. The room spun with tension, every breath heavy, every second stretching longer than the last. My heart hammered, torn between dread and anticipation. What was Jacob about to do from beyond the grave? I'll never forget James's face. It was pale, almost green, as though he'd swallowed poison. His eyes darted toward me, searching, accusing, panicked all at once. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. The lawyer cleared his throat again, eyes moving deliberately across the pages. And just as he was about to continue, the door to the office creaked open. A figure stepped in. And with that single entrance, everything we thought we knew about Jacob's will and his secrets began to unravel. The air in the room froze as the door creaked open. Every head turned. James stiffened beside me, his knuckles tightening on the arm of his chair. Mr. Whitman, the lawyer, paused mid-sentence, his glasses sliding down his nose as his eyes fixed on the doorway. And there, framed by the polished wood, stood a woman I had never seen before. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a navy blue suit that looked more expensive than anything I owned. Her black hair fell in sleek waves over her shoulders, and in her hand she clutched a slim leather folder. But it wasn't her clothes or her poise that made my stomach drop. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, as if she belonged in that room, in Jacob's story, in our lives. James shot up from his chair, his voice cracking with fury. "Who the hell are you?" The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "My name," she said calmly, "is Melissa Carter." The name meant nothing to me, but James reacted as though someone had struck him. His face turned red, his fists clenched. "You don't belong here," he spat. "This is family business." But Mr. Whitman raised his hand, silencing him. "Actually, Mr. Walker," he said in his even, lawyerly tone, "Miss Carter has every right to be here. Your father included her in his final instructions." The words hit me like a physical blow. Included her? Why? I clutched the arms of my chair, my mind racing. Who was this woman? What connection could she possibly have to Jacob? Melissa gave me a small nod, as though she understood the storm of questions inside me. She moved gracefully to a chair at the end of the table and sat, laying her folder gently in front of her. "Please," she said softly, "go on." The silence was suffocating. My heart pounded in my ears, and James looked like he was about to explode. And then Mr. Whitman began again, his voice steady, though the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. "To my beloved wife, Jane Walker." The words washed over me like a wave, but I barely heard the rest. All I could think of was the stranger now sitting across from me, her eyes fixed on the lawyer, her face unreadable. What was happening? 2 weeks earlier, I had been standing in my kitchen staring at Jacob's favorite mug. It still sat in the cupboard where he'd left it, a chipped old thing from a roadside diner in New Mexico. He'd loved that mug, even though we'd collected finer ones over the years. I used to tease him that he liked it more than his crystal whiskey glasses. I remember that morning clearly. The sunlight was streaming through the window, the sound of birds filling the air, but all I could feel was emptiness. Grief is strange like that. It sneaks up on you in moments that should be ordinary. I had tried to fill my days since the funeral with little tasks. Tending to the garden, sorting through old photographs, baking bread the way Jacob liked it. But no matter what I did, the silence of the house pressed down on me. James had barely called. He was busy, he said. Important things to handle. But I knew him too well. He wasn't grieving. He was circling like a hawk, waiting to see what his father had left behind. I told myself I didn't care. That the money, the businesses, the properties, they weren't mine to worry about. Jacob had built them, and Jacob had made his choices. I only wanted peace. But deep down, a part of me was afraid. Afraid of being cast aside, of James seeing me as a burden, of being left alone with nothing after giving my life to a man and a family who often put me last. And so, when the letter from Mr. Whitman arrived, my hands trembled. I sat at the kitchen table, reading and rereading the words as if they might change. You are requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Jacob Walker. Requested, not invited, not welcomed, requested. The formality of it chilled me, as though even death had stripped away intimacy. Back in the lawyer's office, my mind returned to the present, the weight of grief mixing now with suspicion. Melissa Carter. Who was she really? Was she a business associate? A charity director? Or something far darker? Someone Jacob had hidden from me all these years? James seemed to think so. He glared at her as though she were an intruder in his kingdom, an enemy trying to steal his birthright. I'd never seen him so openly furious, his entitlement raw and unfiltered. Mr. Whitman, unbothered by the storm brewing across the table, continued reading. To my beloved wife, Jane Walker, I leave. The words hung in the air, heavy with anticipation. I held my breath. James leaned forward, his nails digging into the wood. Melissa sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly on her folder. But before Mr. Whitman could finish the sentence, James slammed his hand on the table. No, he snapped. This is a setup. She doesn't deserve anything. The room erupted. James, I gasped, my voice trembling with both shock and anger. How dare you? I'm the only child, he shouted, cutting me off. I'm the one who should inherit Dad's estate, not you. You never worked for any of it. And as for her, he jabbed a finger toward Melissa, his voice dripping with venom. She's probably some scam artist who wormed her way into Dad's life when he was weak. Melissa's calm expression didn't falter, but her eyes flashed with something, pain, maybe, or fury carefully restrained. James, Mr. Whitman said firmly, if you cannot control yourself, I will have to ask you to leave. But James didn't stop. He turned to me, his face twisted with rage. Mom, you think you know Dad? You think you were his only love. Wake up. There are things you don't know. Things that will destroy you. The words sliced through me like shards of glass. My hand shook. My throat tightened. What are you talking about? I whispered. But James only leaned back in his chair, his smirk returning as though he held some secret weapon. Keep listening, he said. And then, with deliberate calm, he folded his arms and waited. For the rest of that day, I could barely think. The reading continued, Mr. Whitman trying to maintain order, but my mind spun with questions. What did James know? Who was Melissa really? And what in Jacob's will could possibly make my own son turn against me so openly, so cruelly? As I sat there, trying to steady myself, I remembered something Jacob once said. We had been in the garden, years ago, planting roses. He leaned on the shovel, sweat dripping down his brow, and told me, Jane, secrets are like weeds. Leave them long enough, and they choke everything good you've built. At the time, I laughed. I thought he meant business, money, politics. But now, staring across the table at Melissa Carter and my own son's twisted smile, I wondered if Jacob had been warning me about something much closer to home. The lawyer's voice droned on, but my thoughts kept drifting. My hands were cold, my body tense, as though waiting for a storm to break. And then, just as Mr. Whitman turned the page, just as I thought I might finally hear what Jacob had left me, Melissa spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "There's something you don't know, Mrs. Walker," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "Something Jacob wanted me to tell you, personally." The room went still again. My heart thundered, my palms slick with sweat. "What do you mean?" I managed to whisper. Melissa placed her hand on the leather folder in front of her, her expression unreadable. And then, with one slow, deliberate motion, she opened it. Inside was a stack of papers neatly bound, with Jacob's signature scrawled across the top. James shot out of his chair, knocking it backward with a crash. "Don't you dare," he shouted, his voice echoing through the office. But Melissa only looked at me, her eyes locking with mine, and said words that made my blood run cold. "Jacob trusted me to deliver this truth to you. And once you read it, nothing in your life will ever be the same." Melissa's hands trembled ever so slightly as she lifted the first sheet of paper from the folder. Her eyes met mine, steady and calm, but I could feel the weight of her words before she even spoke. "This," she said softly, "is what Jacob wanted you to see first." My hand shook as I took the paper. It was a letter, written in Jacob's familiar slanted handwriting, and the first words made my stomach twist. "Jane, if you are reading this, it means the moment I feared most has come. My mistakes have followed me, and I must set the record straight before it is too late." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my trembling hands. James leaned forward, his face pale and taut, as though he could force the words off the page before I read them. Melissa continued, her voice quiet but firm. "This is only the beginning. There are instructions, confessions, and truths here that Jacob could not tell you in life. He trusted me to make sure you got them." James's face turned from anger to disbelief, then fear, all in a heartbeat. "You can't just show her that. That's private," he snapped. Melissa's eyes didn't waver. "Jacob wanted her to have it. All of it. And he made it very clear that anyone trying to interfere," she paused, giving James a pointed glance, "would not be considered in his final wishes." My heart raced. My mind spun. What could be so important that Jacob would entrust it to a stranger rather than his own son? I opened the letter slowly, the paper crackling between my fingers. "I have loved you, Jane, more than anyone in this world. But there are things you don't know about my life, and about James. Some of these truths will hurt, but you must hear them. You are stronger than you believe. Trust no one's face. Trust only what your heart tells you." I felt a chill as I read. Trust only what my heart tells me? Was Jacob warning me about James? James, my son, has a brilliance I cannot deny, but he is impulsive, selfish, and blinded by desire. I have tried to guide him, but my efforts have failed. He does not understand the value of humility, patience, or kindness. I fear that after I am gone, he may betray the family, the business, and even you, Jane. That is why I have arranged my estate differently than most would expect." I gasped. My hand shook. My eyes filled with tears. I had never heard Jacob speak of James in such a way, even privately. I always knew James was difficult, but betrayal? Was Jacob seeing something I had missed all along? Melissa leaned forward. "There's more," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Jacob wanted to make sure you were protected, that James couldn't undo everything he built. Especially not now." James's face twisted in fury. "Protected? Protected from what?" he shouted. "This is my father's money. I earn nothing. This is an insult." Melissa's gaze didn't waver. "Your father earned it, James. And he loved you. But he knew that love alone isn't enough to guide a man's choices. He left instructions, clear instructions, about who receives what and why. And you," she said, her voice hardening slightly, "must understand that defiance will only harm you." My hands were shaking too much to continue reading, so Melissa took the letter from me and began to read aloud, her voice smooth, deliberate. "To Jane, my beloved wife, I leave the majority of my estate, including all real property, financial assets, and trusts. My reasoning is simple. Jane has been my partner, my confidant, my anchor. She understands the importance of kindness, empathy, and responsibility. She will use this wealth wisely, not for vanity or pride, but for the good of those around her. James will receive smaller shares, with strict conditions to ensure he does not squander what I have built." I blinked, unable to comprehend the words fully. My son, my own child, was to receive less than me, and not just less, but under conditions? James's face went pale. His voice trembled as he said, "You can't do this. Dad wouldn't do this. It's impossible." Melissa's expression softened slightly. "It's exactly what your father wanted, James, and I am here to make sure it is carried out." For a moment, the room was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. I could feel the tension pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. Then James lunged for the papers on the table, his fingers snatching at the folder. Melissa shifted her chair back, and the leather of her purse bumped against the table with a sharp thunk. "James," I cried, jumping to my feet. "Stop. You're not going to ruin this." But James didn't hear me. His anger had taken over completely. "I won't let you, steal this from me," he yelled, waving his hands wildly. I could see it all now, years of entitlement, selfishness, and greed manifesting in one moment. My stomach turned, and I realized just how dangerous it was to underestimate my own son. Melissa's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Walker," she said calmly, "you need to understand that your father made these decisions carefully. You cannot change them now." James froze, his chest heaving. For a second, I thought he might storm out of the room, but then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled, a small, cunning smile. "You think this ends here," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You think I'll just take this lying down?" I felt a chill. That smile wasn't the smile of a hurt child. It was the smile of someone plotting revenge. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and sleepless nights. James became unpredictable, alternating between pleading, shouting, and moments of cold, calculated charm as he tried to sway me or intimidate Melissa. I tried to remain calm, but every time I sat down with the letters and documents, every time I read Jacob's careful instructions, my heart ached with the realization that I had been completely underestimating my son's capacity for cruelty. Melissa, however, remained a pillar of strength. She explained everything in meticulous detail. The trust Jacob had set up, the conditions on James's inheritance, the charitable donations, and even the ways Jacob had ensured that the money could not be misused. Through it all, I realized something I hadn't understood before. Jacob had not just loved me, he had protected me. Even in death, he had planned for my safety, my dignity, and my happiness. And yet, James refused to accept it. One night, as I sat alone in my bedroom, reviewing the documents Melissa had left with me, I realized something terrifying. James wasn't going to stop. He wouldn't. He would do anything, lie, cheat, manipulate, even threaten to get what he wanted. And with his intelligence, charm, and familiarity with the family's business, he had the tools to cause real damage. I shivered. The thought of betrayal from my own son was unbearable, but I knew I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me. I had to act. But before I could formulate any plan, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, and my hands shook as I saw the message. "Mom, you should have let this go. You don't know what's coming. Meet me at the office tomorrow. Alone." The sender? James. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. He wanted to meet me alone. And I realized in that instant that the real battle wasn't just about money. It was about trust, loyalty, and survival. I didn't know what James planned, but one thing was certain. The war for Jacob's legacy and for my own safety was only beginning. As I looked out the window at the Houston skyline, lights twinkling like distant stars, I made a silent vow to myself. No matter what it took, I would not be betrayed. I would not be silenced. I would survive. But survival came at a cost. And the moment I stepped into James's trap the next day, I would learn just how high that cost might be. "Mom, you should have let this go. You don't know what's coming. Meet me at the office tomorrow. Alone." The sender? James. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. He wanted to meet me alone. And I realized in that instant that the real battle wasn't just about money. It was about trust, loyalty, and survival. I didn't know what James planned, but one thing was certain. The war for Jacob's legacy and for my own safety was only beginning. As I looked out the window at the Houston skyline, lights twinkling like distant stars, I made a silent vow to myself. No matter what it took, I would not be betrayed. I would not be silenced. I would survive. But survival came at a cost. And the moment I stepped into James's trap the next day, I would learn just how high that cost might be. The next morning, I woke with a sense of dread pressing against my chest. James's message burned in my mind like a warning flare. Alone. He wanted to meet me alone. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and slacks that allowed ease of movement, but looked respectable. My hand shook slightly as I fastened my necklace, the small gold locket Jacob had given me decades ago. Inside was a picture of him smiling, a younger version of the man I had loved my entire life. Melissa had called early that morning, sensing my unease. "Jane," she said, her voice steady, "you need to be careful. James is unpredictable, and now that he knows you have control of the estate, he may try anything." I nodded, though my throat was tight. "I know. I can't let him think he can scare me." "Don't underestimate him," she warned. "And don't go anywhere without someone knowing where you are." I reassured her, though deep down I knew she was right. By mid-morning, I arrived at James's office in downtown Houston. The building was tall, sleek, all glass and steel reflecting the morning sun. It was a symbol of ambition, of pride, of wealth, the kind James craved above everything else. I stepped into the lobby, trying to steady my breath. The receptionist barely looked up from her computer as I asked for James. "He's expecting you," she said, voice bored. "Third floor, suite 12B. I took the elevator, my stomach twisting with every floor. By the time the doors opened, I felt like I was walking into a trap. James's office was luxurious, all mahogany panels and leather furniture. But it felt cold, almost sterile. He was seated behind a large desk, looking relaxed, even smug. "Mom," he said, standing as I entered. "I'm glad you came." I forced myself to smile. "You asked me here, James." "I'm listening." He gestured toward a chair, and I sat cautiously. His gaze was intense, almost piercing. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about Dad's will. About everything." I remained silent, letting him continue. "You think you can just take everything he left and run the show," he said, leaning forward. "But you don't understand business. You don't understand how the world works. You're soft, Mom. Too soft." I felt a flash of anger. "Jacob trusted me because I am careful, honest, and kind," I said. "Those are not weaknesses, James. Those are strengths." He chuckled, a low, bitter sound. "Kindness won't protect you. Money won't protect you. And soon, you'll see that love won't protect you either." My stomach dropped. The words sounded like a threat, and I realized that James wasn't just angry, he was plotting. Suddenly, the office door clicked behind me. I turned quickly, but the door was closed and locked. I froze. James's smile widened. "I thought I'd make sure you were cooperative," he said. Panic surged, but I forced myself to stay calm. Years of raising James had taught me to read his moods, to anticipate his moves. And now I had to think fast. "You're making a mistake, James," I said slowly, keeping my voice steady. "Hurting me won't help you. It'll only make things worse." He leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. "You don't know what I'm capable of. You never did. And now you're standing in my way. I can't let that happen." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the fear twisting my insides. I remembered Jacob's words, "Trust only what your heart tells you." And my heart told me that I could survive this. I had to. "You want control," I said softly. "But control isn't everything. Look at Dad's life. Look at what really mattered. You've never seen the bigger picture." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. I pressed on. "Jacob built this estate to protect people, to help people, not to feed greed. That's why he trusted Melissa and me. Not because we're stronger than you, but because we understand responsibility." James's jaw tightened. He was listening, but I could see the internal battle raging behind his eyes. Part of him wanted to argue. Another part was calculating, weighing his options. And then, without warning, he slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough," he shouted. "You're not going to lecture me. I've been patient. I've been polite. But now you're testing me." I flinched. His anger radiated outward like heat from a fire. Suddenly, He reached into his desk drawer. I froze, fearing the worst. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with his personal stamp. He tossed it onto the desk. This is a list of properties, investments, and accounts Dad left behind. But there's a catch. Follow my instructions exactly, and maybe you get what's yours. Disobey me and, well, let's just say I'm very persuasive. I stared at the envelope, my pulse racing. The room felt smaller, tighter, the air almost suffocating. You'd never do this, I whispered, trying to buy time. I already did, he said, leaning back with a self-satisfied smile. I've been preparing for this for months. I knew Dad wouldn't make me the primary heir, so I had to act. And now, Mom, you're going to see just how far I'll go to get what's mine. I realized then that James wasn't just angry. He was dangerous, and the game he had set in motion could destroy us all. I had to think fast. I took a deep breath. James, I said slowly, deliberately, if you think fear will make me back down, you're wrong. You don't understand me. His eyes narrowed. Do I need to remind you who has the upper hand here? I smiled faintly, a small, knowing smile. Maybe not. But remember this, Dad taught me more than kindness. He taught me patience, resilience, and strategy. And those lessons aren't just for business. They're for survival. For a moment, he blinked, surprised by my composure. But then his expression hardened, and he leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. You're going to regret that, Mom. I promise you that. At that moment, the office phone rang, sharp and urgent. James reached for it, but I saw an opening. I realized that my opportunity to act might be slipping away. I had to make a choice. Stay seated and negotiate, or take a risk and gain control of the situation. Before I could decide, the door behind me clicked again. This time it wasn't locked. Melissa. She appeared in the doorway, her calm presence instantly filling the room. James froze, caught off guard. You called me, she asked, her tone measured, but her eyes sharp. I didn't, he stammered, clearly rattled. Melissa stepped fully into the room, placing her briefcase on the desk. She opened it, revealing a tablet. On it were financial documents, security alerts, and a recording of James's recent attempts to manipulate the estate. His face went pale. You don't have the right. She cut him off. Jacob anticipated your moves, James. He left safeguards, and I've been instructed to enforce them. I realized then that we were no longer negotiating. This was no longer just about money or power. This was about survival, strategy, and exposing truth. And James understood it. He backed up, eyes wide, and I felt a cold dread settle over me. Then he said words that made my blood run cold. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming next. You'll regret this, Jane. You'll regret crossing me. Melissa's calm demeanor didn't falter, but her hand hovered near a device that looked like it could alert security. I realized then that James had one final trick up his sleeve. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't predict. And as I took a deep breath, preparing for whatever he would unleash, the office lights flickered. Then the entire building went dark. The darkness hit like a physical force. One moment the office was sleek and polished, sunlight reflecting off glass walls. The next moment it was swallowed in black. The hum of electronics vanished, replaced by the low groan of the building settling, or perhaps warning. James froze, his smug confidence evaporating. Melissa instinctively reached for my arm. Stay close, she whispered. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The sudden loss of light made everything feel larger, more dangerous. Shadows shifted in ways that weren't there before, and I realized just how exposed we were. James swore under his breath. This isn't supposed to happen, he muttered, his voice tight. Is it your doing? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He shook his head quickly. No, I didn't. Before he could finish, there was a loud crash from the hallway outside. Something heavy hit the wall, sending debris skittering across the floor. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Melissa guided me toward the corner of the office, using her shoulder to shield me. We need to stay calm. The emergency lights should kick in any second, she said. But they didn't. I could hear James moving behind us, but he wasn't speaking. My imagination ran wild. Was he trying to sabotage us further, or was he panicked too? I tried to steady my breathing. I had faced difficult situations before, but nothing like this. I realized in that instant that Jacob's warnings had been about more than money or deceit. They were about surviving the chaos people could create when greed overtook reason. Melissa whispered, "Jane, there's a staircase behind this wall. Follow me." We moved carefully, hands outstretched, stepping over toppled chairs and papers scattered across the floor. Every step made my stomach twist. I realized how easy it would be to stumble, to give up control, to panic. James's voice suddenly rang out, sharp and terrified. "Wait, don't go." I froze. Melissa glared at him. "Step aside, James. We're leaving." He hesitated, then seemed to gather courage. "You can't just walk away with it all," he shouted, his voice echoing. "The will, the assets, everything." I swallowed hard. "James, listen to me. You're not thinking clearly. You're scared. That's what's making you dangerous." He laughed, but it wasn't joyful. It was the laugh of someone desperate and cornered. "I'm not scared. You'll see. You'll regret this. You can't take what's mine." Melissa led me down the stairs. The darkness pressed on us like a living thing. I realized just how much I relied on her. Her calm, her decisiveness. I had thought I was strong, but standing in that pitch-black stairwell, I understood the value of allies, of trust, and of patience. As we descended, I noticed James's shadow flitting along the railing behind us. He was fast, unpredictable. My pulse accelerated. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the floor above. Something metallic had fallen, and the sound reverberated through the building. I jumped, instinctively gripping Melissa's arm. "It's okay," she said firmly. "We keep moving. Focus on each step. Don't let fear control you." We reached the lobby finally. Emergency lights flickered on, casting harsh white beams across the space. Dust danced in the air, shimmering in the light. The receptionist was nowhere in sight. Desks were overturned. The front doors had been locked automatically due to the blackout. I realized then that James had not just planned to challenge me in the office, he had created a trap. Melissa pressed a button on a small device she pulled from her bag. A soft click sounded and the locks disengaged. "Go," she said, pushing me gently toward the doors. But James wasn't finished. He appeared suddenly in the doorway leading from the staircase, his face twisted with determination. "You think you can escape me?" he shouted. I froze. My heart hammered against my chest. I realized then that I had underestimated him. Not his intelligence, but his capacity for recklessness. Melissa stepped forward. "Jane, stay calm. Don't engage him. Follow my lead." We moved quickly, weaving around debris and heading for the exit. James lunged toward us, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might grab my arm. But Melissa grabbed his wrist, twisting it sharply. He yelped and stumbled back. "You can't stop me," he shouted. "I don't have to stop you," Melissa said calmly. "I just have to protect her." We reached the front doors. I could see the city outside, sunlight reflecting off nearby buildings. Safety was within reach. But just as I stepped forward, James shouted one last time. "You haven't seen the worst yet. You'll regret crossing me. Everything is coming for you." I froze, the words chilling me to the bone. Melissa shoved the doors open and we rushed into the street. The sunlight was blinding, but it was real. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my face, trying to calm my racing heart. But even as we moved away from the building, I knew the danger wasn't over. James's words echoed in my mind. "Everything is coming for you." For the next several days, James continued his attacks, not physical, but psychological. Emails, calls, subtle threats. He tried to manipulate me, using fear to regain control. But each time, I reminded myself of Jacob's teachings, patience, strategy, and empathy. I realized that I couldn't fight him with anger. I had to be smarter, more careful. I began documenting every encounter, every threat, every unusual move he made. Melissa helped me set up safeguards around our finances and property. We created secure communication channels, encrypted files, and contingency plans. And yet, despite the precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that James had one final move left, something extreme, something devastating. One evening, as I reviewed the documents Jacob had left, Melissa called my attention to a line I had overlooked. Should James act recklessly or attempt to undermine the estate, further safeguards are in place. Only Jane, my beloved wife, may access the final instructions. I realized then that Jacob had planned not just for protection, but for revelation. He had anticipated James's desperation, his recklessness, and he had left a way for me to finally regain control. Not through confrontation, but through careful, deliberate action. But before I could consider what that action might be, a sudden knock came at the door. Melissa and I exchanged a glance. Neither of us had expected anyone. I went to the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. Outside stood a man I had never seen before, dressed in a dark suit, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He held a briefcase, and his posture was rigid, almost military. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" I called through the door. The man didn't answer immediately. He opened the briefcase slightly, revealing documents stamped with official seals. "My name is Agent Carter," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "I've been instructed to deliver these files to Jane Walker. They concern your late husband's estate and the threats against it." Melissa stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "How do we know we can trust him?" The agent's gaze was unwavering. "You don't. But you have to read these documents. They're urgent, and time is running out." I felt a chill. James's warning, "Everything is coming for you," made sense now. The threat wasn't just psychological or legal. It was real, dangerous, and the moment we opened the files, we would be stepping into a new phase of this battle, one I hadn't anticipated. As I reached for the first envelope, my hands trembling, I realized the truth. The war for Jacob's legacy and my survival was far from over. And whatever James had planned next would test every lesson Jacob had taught me, every ounce of strength I possessed. The agent's briefcase felt heavy in my hands, as if it carried not just papers, but the weight of his storm about to descend. I carefully opened the first envelope, Melissa standing beside me, alert and poised. The first document was a detailed account of Jacob's estate. All properties, bank accounts, trusts, and investments. But that wasn't what made my heart pound. It was the annotations. Every account, every property, every investment had a line explaining potential vulnerabilities and threats. Jacob had anticipated more than just James's temper. He had considered people outside the family, business rivals, opportunists, and even those who might try to manipulate James himself. The second document made me gasp. It was a list of security measures, some of which I had never even known existed. Hidden surveillance in the homes, GPS trackers in certain high-value assets, encrypted communications to prevent hacking. Jacob had been meticulous, almost obsessive. Melissa leaned over my shoulder, pointing at a page. "Look here." Jacob knew James might attempt to seize control, either through manipulation, intimidation, or even force. These measures were specifically designed to counteract him. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that Jacob had planned for this, terror at the lengths James might go to circumvent those plans. The next set of papers made my stomach twist. There were recorded conversations, audio logs, interviews with financial advisors, and even some private recordings Jacob had made of meetings with James. Melissa looked at me gravely. "Jane, you need to hear this." I pressed play on the first recording. James's voice filled the small living room where we had brought the agent's files. "I don't care what Dad says. I'm the one who should inherit everything. I'm the one who built connections, made deals, worked nights and weekends. Mom, she doesn't understand business." Jacob's calm reply followed, his voice gentle but firm. "James, wealth isn't only about money. Responsibility, integrity, and empathy matter more. You have potential, yes, but you need guidance." James scoffed. "Guidance? Dad, I'm ready to run this. You're holding me back." The recording continued, revealing conversations I had never known existed. James making veiled threats to advisors, trying to pressure lawyers, and even planning ways to exploit loopholes in trusts. Melissa turned to me. "Jane, he's more dangerous than we thought. And now he knows how much control you have. He'll act." I clenched my hands. Every instinct screamed that we had to be careful. Yet I also felt a strange surge of resolve. Jacob had prepared me for this, even if I didn't realize it until now. The agent stepped forward. There's more. These next files contain legal documents, hidden clauses, and something called a contingency trust. It only activates under certain conditions, all designed by Mr. Walker himself. You need to read this carefully. This is your safeguard. Melissa helped me open the envelope. Inside were pages densely packed with legal language, but the meaning was clear. Jacob had not only protected the bulk of his estate for me, he had included mechanisms to expose any deceit, manipulation, or illegal action by James or anyone attempting to take control. I felt a mix of awe and determination. Jacob had been brilliant, meticulous, clever, and protective. And now, I had the tools to honor his wishes. But before I could process it fully, the agent handed me a final set of documents. I paused, noting the official seal and the bold letters at the top. Confidential. James Walker Assessment and Risk Report. Melissa frowned. This is unusual. We haven't seen something like this before. Jacob kept records on James's temperament, decision-making patterns, even psychological tendencies. It's extremely detailed. I opened the first page. My breath caught. The report described in precise detail James's potential for impulsive and dangerous behavior, including threats, manipulation, and attempts to bypass legal protocols. Every possibility had been predicted. Every reaction mapped out. Melissa's eyes widened. Jane, Jacob knew he might go this far. He anticipated threats to your life, not just to the estate. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The implications were terrifying. James wasn't just greedy, he was capable of taking extreme measures, and Jacob had prepared for them in advance. The agent spoke again, his voice calm but firm. These files are to be used by you and your trusted allies only. Any attempt by James to circumvent the system will be logged and can be prosecuted. But you must act cautiously. He's clever and dangerous. Melissa turned to me. We need a plan. Step 1, protect your safety. Step 2, enforce the conditions Jacob left. Step 3, expose any attempts by James to interfere. We can do this, Jane, but we must act carefully. I nodded. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind was already racing. This wasn't just about revenge or reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It was about survival, justice, and proving that integrity mattered more than greed. For the next few hours, we organized the files, categorized the recordings, and outlined a strategy. Every detail mattered. Every precaution was necessary. Melissa was methodical, precise, and utterly calm, a sharp contrast to my own racing thoughts. As evening fell, I felt exhausted but focused. I realized that the estate wasn't just money, it was legacy. Jacob's teachings, his values, his vision, they were all embedded in these documents. Protecting the estate meant protecting the life and lessons he had built. But just as I felt a small sense of control, my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from James. You think you're safe, Mom. You think Melissa can protect you. You'll see soon enough. Everything is coming, and you won't escape it. Watch your back. I swallowed hard. My pulse quickened. Melissa read the message over my shoulder, frowning. He's escalating. He knows we're organizing, and he's testing boundaries. We need to anticipate his next move. I nodded, though fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve. James was clever, ruthless, and unpredictable. I had never seen him so dangerous, so relentless. Suddenly, the agent's phone rang. He answered quickly, his face going pale as he listened. Jane, he said urgently, hanging up the call. There's been a breach. Someone accessed the secondary security system. We're not sure who, but it could be James. Melissa's jaw tightened. We need to act immediately. Jane, are you ready? I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had prepared, strategized, and learned from Jacob's guidance. But the reality of confrontation was approaching fast, and I could feel the danger closing in. The agent handed us encrypted tablets displaying maps of the properties, alerts, and possible vulnerabilities. Each read that made my stomach twist. James wasn't just threatening. We were now in a race against time. He had already started moving, and we had to anticipate every step. Melissa looked at me. Jane, this is it. Everything we've prepared, every precaution, every document, it comes down to this. We need to secure the estate, protect you, and counteract James's moves before he can escalate further. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hand shook slightly, but determination surged. Jacob had prepared me. Melissa was by my side, and the tools were all here. And yet, deep in my gut, I knew that James had one final move left, something extreme, something devastating that none of us had anticipated. As the night grew darker outside, I realized the truth. The battle was far from over. And the next move James would make could change everything, forever. The following morning, Houston was quiet, almost eerily so, as if the city itself were holding its breath. But I knew that calm was an illusion. James had already acted, and the consequences were about to unfold. Melissa and I were in the home office, reviewing the agent's latest reports when a loud crash shook the house. The sound came from the back garage, followed by the unmistakable shattering of glass. I jumped from my chair, heart racing. What was that? I whispered. Melissa didn't hesitate. James. I followed her as she moved toward the back of the house, her hand on the tablet that displayed the property's security feeds. Red alerts flashed across the screen. Broken glass, forced entry attempts, multiple sensors triggered simultaneously. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. James wasn't just testing boundaries now, he was escalating, targeting the estate directly. Melissa reached the back door and carefully peered out. He's here, she said, voice calm but low. And he's not alone. I felt a chill. Not alone. Yes, Melissa said. There are 2 others with him, probably people he's hired. He's trying to intimidate, possibly steal, or worse. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of Jacob's lessons. Panic would not help. Patience, strategy, and courage would. Melissa whispered, Jane, we have a few options. We can try to confront them head on, but they're armed and desperate. Or we can follow the emergency protocol Jacob set up, evacuate, secure, and counteract. I nodded. We follow the protocol. We moved quickly, locking doors and activating internal security systems. The lights flickered as the intrusion sensor screamed, warning us of movement in every corner of the house. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. Suddenly, a shadow appeared at the back window. James's silhouette, unmistakable, tense and confident. He waved mockingly at me, a cruel smirk on his face. You can't hide, Mom, he shouted. I know every corner of this place. You think your little plans will stop me? You'll regret standing in my way. Melissa placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Stay calm. Let's get to the safe room. I followed her down the hallway, heart hammering. We reached a hidden door behind a large bookshelf, something Jacob had installed years ago for emergencies. Melissa pressed the hidden latch, and we slipped inside. The room was small but secure, with reinforced walls, communication systems, and a direct link to the agent's network. It felt like stepping into a fortress, a reminder that Jacob had planned not just for wealth, but for protection. From inside the safe room, we could monitor James's movements through the house's cameras. I watched as he and his accomplices moved methodically, breaking into cabinets, rifling through desks, searching for anything of value. Melissa leaned over the monitors. He's reckless, she said, but he's also clever. He's not just after money. He's trying to intimidate and destabilize you. I clenched my fists. He'll see he can't win. Not if I use what Dad taught me. Hours passed as we monitored, documented, and strategized. James grew increasingly frustrated, shouting orders at the 2 men and occasionally waving at the cameras as if to mock us. But we remained calm, methodical, and protected. Then, as dusk approached, another alert appeared on the tablet. James was heading to the study, where some of the most sensitive documents were stored. Melissa's eyes narrowed. This is it. He wants the files that could expose the final contingencies of the estate. If he gets them, everything could be at risk. I felt a surge of determination. We can't let that happen. Melissa nodded. We'll have to use the countermeasures Jacob installed. It's time. We activated the internal lockdown systems. Doors sealed automatically, windows reinforced, and silent alarms notified local security authorities. Small compartments released decoys and encrypted the digital files. James's movements were being tracked in real time, and every step he took triggered alerts. Through the monitors, I could see his frustration grow. He pounded on doors, shouted at his accomplices, and cursed under his breath. He had expected an easy victory, and now the house itself seemed to betray him. Melissa leaned close. "Jane, you need to stay calm and focused. His next move will be desperate and dangerous. We have to anticipate it." Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the garage. Smoke billowed into the house, and alarms blared even louder. My stomach lurched. "He's escalating." Melissa shouted over the noise. We watched in horror as one of the accomplices tried to force the garage door open. The countermeasure system activated, locking the door and trapping the intruder inside temporarily. James shouted in fury, slamming his fists against the reinforced glass. I felt fear rise, but I pushed it down. This was the moment to remain composed, just as Jacob had taught me. Melissa pulled me aside. "Jane, it's time to act. We have to secure the files and expose James's actions before it goes further." I nodded. My hand shook slightly, but my mind was clear. Using the encrypted network, Melissa and I remotely moved the sensitive files to a secure off-site location. Every time James tried to access a cabinet or drawer, he triggered a digital lock. Every attempt to force entry was documented. Finally, after hours of tension, James's anger reached a breaking point. He realized he couldn't get what he wanted, and his behavior became increasingly reckless. Then, the most extreme event yet occurred. James's accomplice, frustrated and panicked, grabbed a small fire extinguisher and smashed it against the monitors, sending sparks flying. Smoke filled the room, alarms blaring louder, and the smell of burning plastic made my eyes water. I coughed, struggling to breathe. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Jane, we have to get out now." We activated the emergency exit. The door slid open, revealing a hidden tunnel Jacob had installed leading directly outside. Smoke swirled behind us as we ran, the sound of James's furious shouting echoing through the house. We emerged in the back garden just as the fire alarms were fully engaged. Emergency responders were already on their way, guided by the alarms we had triggered. James and his accomplices were trapped inside, unable to escape without confronting the authorities. I leaned against Melissa, heart racing. We did it," I said, though my voice was shaky. Melissa nodded, eyes scanning the house. "For now. But James isn't finished. He's smart, ruthless, and desperate. This is only the beginning." I realized she was right. Even though we had survived this extreme event, the battle was far from over. James had shown his true colors, reckless, dangerous, and willing to escalate to life-threatening measures. As we watched the fire trucks arrive and the smoke rise into the Houston sky, my phone buzzed. A text message appeared from an unknown number. "You think you won, Jane? You haven't seen the last of me. Everything you love will be at risk. Everything." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. James's warning was clear, and now more personal than ever. Melissa put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've survived this, Jane. But we have to be ready for what comes next. He'll escalate again, and we have to anticipate it." I nodded, determination burning in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, justice, and protecting everything Jacob had built. And deep down, I knew the next move James would make would be even more extreme than anything he had done so far. The war was far from over. The next morning, the Houston sun felt ordinary, almost peaceful, but I knew better. Danger often hides behind calm appearances. My phone buzzed with multiple alerts. Emails, security notifications, and text messages, every one from James or connected to him. Melissa and I were reviewing the latest updates from the agent when a news alert flashed across the screen. Local business tycoon faces allegations of fraud and mismanagement. I froze. Melissa leaned closer, her eyes scanning the article. "Jane, this is him. James. He's gone public. He's using the media to discredit you, the estate, and even Jacob's legacy. He's trying to turn public opinion against you before we can act. I felt a wave of disbelief mixed with fury. Public humiliation, attacks on character, and attempts to manipulate perception. James had escalated far beyond anything we had anticipated. Melissa, he can't get away with this. People will see through it, I said, though my voice shook slightly. I know, she said, but he's clever. He knows how to frame it so that it looks legitimate. This is dangerous. If we don't respond strategically, he could sway investors, neighbors, even friends and family. The estate could be compromised indirectly. I took a deep breath. Jacob had taught me that patience and strategy were key. But seeing James act so boldly, publicly, made me realize the stakes had increased exponentially. We spent the next few hours reviewing the details. James had manipulated several minor financial documents to make it appear that the estate's finances were unstable. He had contacted journalists with anonymous tips, planted stories, and used his social media channels to amplify the narrative. Every step was calculated to intimidate me and destabilize the estate. Melissa turned to me. Jane, this is the extreme phase of his strategy. He's using fear and reputation attacks. But we can counteract it. First, we need proof, documented, verifiable evidence of his manipulation. Second, we need to communicate transparently with anyone affected. Third, we use Jacob's contingency plans to secure the estate and expose him if necessary. I nodded, feeling the familiar surge of determination. James's escalation was dangerous, but it didn't mean he was invincible. I could fight back, intelligently, strategically, and legally. By midday, I was on multiple calls with lawyers, accountants, and the agent coordinating security. Melissa helped draft a statement to the media and key stakeholders, carefully crafted to protect the estate without inflaming James's attacks. Every word was measured, every phrase deliberate. Hours later, I finally had a moment to myself. I looked out the window at Houston's skyline, sunlight glinting off tall buildings. The city was alive, bustling, moving forward, and yet my mind was fixated on the chaos James had unleashed. I thought of Jacob and the lessons he had taught me. Integrity, resilience, patience. I realized now that the battle wasn't just financial or legal. It was moral, emotional, and psychological. I had to remain steadfast, even in the face of deception and betrayal. Melissa interrupted my thoughts. Jane, I have an idea. We can use James's own tactics against him. I looked at her intrigued. We can leverage the surveillance data, recordings, and contingency plans Jacob left. We document his moves, his manipulations, and his lies. Then, strategically, we expose him, but on our terms. Publicly, yes, but controlled, factual, undeniable. I felt a thrill of cautious hope. It's risky, but it could work. We regain control without playing his game blindly. Melissa nodded. Exactly. But first we need to ensure the estate's security and our personal safety. James is reckless, and now he's desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. By evening, we had implemented additional safeguards. Digital files were encrypted, physical assets secured, and our movements monitored. Every action we took was calculated, every decision deliberate. James's public attacks might sway opinion temporarily, but he could not touch the core of Jacob's legacy if we stayed vigilant. As we were finalizing the security protocols, another alert appeared. This time, it was a direct threat, a text message from James sent anonymously through a masked number. You think your little fortress protects you? Think again. Everyone you care about is within reach. Tomorrow, the world will see your empire crumble. Prepare to lose everything. Melissa's eyes darkened. He's planning something bigger. Something public, extreme. This isn't just media attacks anymore. It's personal, and it's designed to escalate fear and chaos. I swallowed hard. My pulse quickened. The threat was real, but so was our preparation. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, but also the clarity of purpose. Jacob's lessons had prepared me for moments like this. Moments that required patience, courage, and intelligence. Melissa continued, Jane, we need to anticipate his move before it happens. Tomorrow, when he acts, we must be ready. If we don't, he could succeed in destabilizing the estate and turning public opinion against you. I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. James had escalated to a public, potentially catastrophic move. But we had the tools, knowledge, and strategy to counteract him. That night, I barely slept. Every alert, every text, every thought of James's escalation haunted me. Yet I knew I had to remain composed, vigilant, and ready. The next morning, as the sun rose over Houston, I prepared for the confrontation. Melissa had gathered all the evidence, documents, and contingency plans. Every step was methodical, deliberate, and calculated. But even as we prepared, I felt a chill of anticipation. James's next move would be extreme, something none of us had fully anticipated. And then the first sign appeared. From my phone, a live feed notification, a large gathering outside the estate gates, cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. Melissa gasped. He's here. Publicly. He's turning this into a spectacle. He wants to intimidate, humiliate, and force a reaction. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race. This was it. The public phase, the extreme escalation we had been anticipating. Every strategy, every precaution, every plan would be tested in the hours ahead. Melissa looked at me, resolute. Jane, stay calm. We have the evidence, the strategy, and the control. He's desperate, but he's predictable. Follow my lead. I nodded, gripping her hand briefly for reassurance. My mind raced with possibilities, calculating risks, and anticipating James's next move. And in that moment, I realized the truth. This confrontation, public and extreme, would determine the course of everything: Jacob's legacy, the estate, and the future of my family. As we moved toward the estate gates, the crowd and cameras came into view. I could see James at the center, smirking, waving to reporters, attempting to control the narrative. My pulse quickened. Every instinct told me he was dangerous, unpredictable, and desperate. Melissa whispered, Jane, stay focused. We're not just responding, we're controlling the narrative. Remember Jacob's lessons. I nodded, my resolve hardening. And then, just as we stepped forward to confront the chaos, a sudden explosion of noise erupted from the crowd. Someone shouted, cameras flashed, and the first shocking, unexpected extreme event of the public confrontation unfolded. I froze, heart pounding, realizing that James had orchestrated something far more dangerous than we had imagined. The world outside our estate gates had become the battlefield, and the stakes were higher than ever. The crowd outside the estate gates had grown chaotic. Flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and curious onlookers made it feel like a stadium rather than the quiet property I had known. At the center, James stood on a small platform, waving and shouting, attempting to control the spectacle. Melissa gripped my arm. Jane, remember, control the narrative. Don't react emotionally. Stay calm. I nodded, though my heart was pounding. James's smirk was infuriating, full of confidence, arrogance, and reckless ambition. He seemed to believe the spectacle itself was enough to intimidate me. Suddenly, James raised a large envelope and held it aloft. He shouted, here it is. Proof that Jane Walker is unfit to manage the estate. Evidence that she has mismanaged Dad's legacy. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Camera flashes went off as reporters leaned forward. My stomach twisted. The envelope, if it contained falsified documents, could sway public opinion. Melissa leaned close. Jane, stay calm. Let's make them see the truth. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Everything James is showing you is false. These so-called documents are manipulated. I have the evidence to prove it. James laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. You think your words can undo the facts? Everyone will believe me. Melissa activated the secure live feed from the estate's internal cameras, projecting it onto the crowd's monitors. Images appeared showing James and his accomplices moving through the house, attempting to access sensitive documents, triggering security measures, and ultimately failing due to the contingency plans Jacob had left. Gasps came from the crowd. Cameras focused on the screens, capturing every detail. I continued, voice strong. Jacob Walker planned for every action. Every move James has made has been documented. The estate's security systems and contingency plans protect the integrity of his legacy. These images prove the truth. Nothing James claims is legitimate. James's face tightened. He glared at the screens, realizing his narrative was unraveling. But he wasn't finished. Desperation flared in his eyes, and he attempted a more extreme move. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, a remote that, according to the monitors, could disable parts of the estate's security systems. He pressed the button. Alarms blared. Smoke and noise erupted as the crowd panicked. Melissa grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Jane, stay calm. We can counteract this. Follow me." Using the secure control system, we remotely activated the estate's override. The device failed to disable the systems, and James's plan collapsed. Security personnel arrived moments later, detaining his accomplices. James, frustrated and desperate, tried to flee but was cornered by officers. The crowd watched in shock. Reporters captured every moment, broadcasting James's reckless actions. The extreme public spectacle had backfired spectacularly. As James was escorted away, Melissa turned to me. "Jane, we've managed the first wave. But he's dangerous. Desperate people don't stop easily." I nodded. My pulse was still racing, but a sense of control settled in. We had survived the public escalation, but the battle wasn't over. Later, in the quiet of the estate, we reviewed the footage and documents. Every movement, every attempt by James had been documented. We could use it to protect the estate legally and publicly. Melissa spoke softly. "Jane, the worst of his public spectacle is over, but he won't stop. Next, he may target individuals, people you care about, or use legal loopholes. We have to anticipate it." I felt a chill, but also a growing resolve. Jacob's lessons had prepared me for this. Strategy, patience, and moral courage would guide the next steps. As night fell over Houston, I reflected on the day's events. James had escalated publicly, risking exposure and humiliation. But the extreme nature of his actions revealed his recklessness and gave us the advantage. Just as I began to feel a measure of relief, a new alert appeared on the estate security system. Someone had breached the secondary gate, an unknown party. The alert indicated that James, or someone acting on his behalf, was attempting another move. Melissa looked at me gravely. "Jane, he's not finished. The next move will be more personal, more extreme, and it could put people in danger." I swallowed hard. My hands clenched into fists. The battle was far from over. And deep down, I knew that the next confrontation would test every ounce of courage, patience, and strategy one had. James's recklessness had been exposed, but the war for Jacob's legacy was still raging. The night air in Houston was heavy, almost suffocating, when the alert came through. My phone vibrated violently, multiple notifications from the estate security system and the agent's network. Melissa and I were reviewing James's past moves when a live feed showed something that made my blood run cold. A masked figure was attempting to gain access to the secondary gate. Not remotely, not through cameras, but physically. Someone had climbed over the perimeter wall, bypassing sensors, and was moving stealthily toward the estate. Melissa's hand shot to my arm. "Jane, he's here. This is personal." I felt a cold wave of fear, but I forced myself to focus. Panic would make us vulnerable. We had to act deliberately, strategically. Melissa activated the estate's internal lockdown systems. Doors sealed automatically, lights flickered on, and hidden cameras captured every movement. The masked figure was quick, moving with purpose. Through the monitors, we could see the silhouette climbing over the gates and approaching the guest house. My heart pounded. James, or someone acting on his behalf, was attempting a direct confrontation. Melissa spoke calmly, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Jane, we stick to the plan. We have safe rooms, overrides, and contingencies. Trust the system." I nodded, swallowing hard. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to steady my breathing. Jacob had prepared for moments like this. Suddenly, an alarm blared and the masked figure froze. The estate security system had detected the intruder and triggered a silent lockdown. The figure glanced around, frustration evident, but did not flee. Instead, they began tampering with the outer locks. Melissa whispered, "They're testing our defenses, trying to force a way in." This is exactly what Jacob warned about: desperation combined with recklessness. I watched, tense, as the figure struggled with the locks. Every second felt like an eternity. The possibility of confrontation loomed, but we remained calm, guided by strategy. Through the monitors, we saw the figure finally giving up and retreating momentarily. My pulse slowed slightly, but Melissa's expression warned me not to relax. "This isn't over," she said. Minutes later, another alert. This time, someone was attempting to access the estate from the front gates. Two masked intruders, moving with precision. They seemed trained, but desperation betrayed them. Melissa and I moved to the safe room, coordinating remotely with the agent and security personnel. Doors locked automatically, internal cameras tracked every movement, and digital overrides ensured that sensitive documents remained inaccessible. Even with these precautions, my mind raced. James had escalated from public attacks to personal threats. The stakes were higher than ever. He wasn't just trying to discredit me. He was trying to intimidate and endanger. Melissa turned to me. "Jane, we need to anticipate his next move. He's desperate, dangerous, and unpredictable. This may be his last-ditch attempt before he escalates further." I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. Every lesson Jacob had taught me, strategy, patience, integrity, was guiding me now. Through the estate's monitors, we could see the intruders coordinating, attempting to bypass security measures. Their movements were calculated, but I could sense the panic underlying their actions. Desperate people make mistakes. Melissa activated a secure communication channel. "This is Jane Walker. You are trespassing. Leave the premises immediately or law enforcement will intervene." One of the intruders glanced at the cameras, then bolted toward the estate's garage. The other tried to breach the main house's exterior door. Melissa and I monitored their actions carefully, coordinating remotely with officers dispatched to the property. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the estate. One of the intruders had triggered an internal security panel, attempting to disable systems manually. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and smoke began to fill the hallway. I coughed, struggling to see through the haze. Melissa grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the safe room. "Jane, stay calm. Follow me." We moved swiftly, doors locking behind us automatically. The intruders were close, their desperate attempts escalating. Through the monitors, I saw them attempting to access the office where sensitive documents were stored. But the contingency plans Jacob had set up were effective. Every drawer and file cabinet locked, every digital file encrypted, every movement documented. Melissa whispered, "Jane, we can turn this against them. Every move they make is being recorded. We can expose them legally and publicly and regain control." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. James's personal escalation was extreme, but it had also revealed his recklessness. We could use it against him. Minutes later, the masked intruders tried to flee, but the estate's automated barriers trapped them. Security personnel arrived simultaneously, apprehending them before any further damage could be done. Breathing heavily, I realized the extent of the danger we had just survived. James had escalated to a personal threat, sending trained individuals to breach the estate and intimidate us. Melissa placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Jane, this was extreme, yes, but we survived, and we documented everything. James's recklessness is now evidence." I nodded, still shaking slightly. The adrenaline coursing through me was intense, but I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Jacob had prepared me for moments like this, moments requiring courage, strategy, and integrity. As the night settled over Houston, I reviewed the security footage and reports with Melissa and the agent. Every move of the intruders was documented, every failed attempt recorded, every breach prevented. The evidence was clear and irrefutable. Melissa spoke softly. "Jane, the personal threat has passed, but James will escalate again. He's unpredictable, dangerous, and desperate. The next move could target more than property. It could target people he knows you care about. I swallowed hard, realizing she was right. James's actions had escalated from greed and manipulation to personal intimidation. The stakes were higher than ever. The agent spoke, his voice low but steady. Jane, these intruders were likely working on his orders. The next phase will be more extreme, and it may involve attempts to manipulate others in your life or public perception. We need to anticipate his actions and prepare countermeasures. Melissa nodded. We need to stay vigilant. Every move must be strategic. Every decision calculated. James is reckless, but desperation makes people dangerous. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. The extreme personal threat had shown me the lengths James was willing to go, but it had also revealed weaknesses in his strategy. Through careful planning, vigilance, and the tools Jacob had left, we had survived, and we were ready for the next phase. But deep down, I knew James had one more extreme move left, something even more dangerous than anything he had done so far. As I reviewed the reports one last time before bed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you're safe, Jane? Tomorrow, everything changes. Be ready. Melissa read it over my shoulder, her face grim. Jane, this isn't just a threat. It's a warning. His next move will be extreme and personal. Prepare yourself. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the warning. James's personal escalation had been terrifying, but the message confirmed it. He was planning something even more extreme, something that could change everything. And I realized, with a mixture of fear and determination, that the next day would test every lesson Jacob had taught me, every ounce of strategy, patience, and courage I possessed. The war for Jacob's legacy and for our lives was far from over. The next morning dawned heavy and gray over Houston, the clouds hanging low as if the city itself sensed the storm about to break. I woke to a buzzing phone, dozens of alerts flashing across the screen. The estate security system had triggered multiple warnings overnight. Melissa was already at the control center, scanning the monitors with calm precision. Jane, it's happening, she said. I felt my stomach twist. What is it? She pointed to the screens. On the far side of the estate, a large truck had pulled up quietly before dawn. Shadows moved quickly around it, masked figures unloading equipment and heading toward the property's gates. Their movements were coordinated, trained, and frighteningly deliberate. This is extreme, Melissa whispered, voice tight. They're prepared for everything, and they're coming for you personally this time. I swallowed hard. The adrenaline surged through me, but I focused, reminding myself of Jacob's lessons, strategy, patience, and calm determination. Panic would make us vulnerable. Through the estate's cameras, I could see the intruders moving swiftly toward the main house. One of them carried what appeared to be a large metal case. Another carried a laptop, possibly connected to the estate systems. Every move was deliberate, every step calculated. Melissa activated the safe room protocols. Doors locked, alarms blared, and internal cameras tracked the intruders. But this was unlike previous attacks. This wasn't just an attempt to intimidate. It was calculated, professional, and possibly life-threatening. I felt a cold knot of fear. James had escalated. This was personal. Melissa looked at me, her eyes steady. Jane, we stick to the plan. Trust the systems, trust the agent, and trust each other. We can survive this. I nodded, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the estate. Sparks flew as the intruders tampered with the garage's automated locks. Smoke began to fill the corridor, alarms blaring louder than ever. Melissa grabbed my arm. Jane, we have to stay inside the safe room. Follow me. We moved quickly, doors sealing behind us. The intruders were now inside the perimeter, moving closer to the main house. Their intent was clear. They wanted access to the estate's critical areas, possibly the safe rooms, possibly to confront us directly. Through the monitors, I could see them attempting to breach the office where Jacob's most sensitive documents were stored. But the contingency measures he had left were working perfectly. Drawers locked automatically, digital files encrypted, and every movement was logged. Melissa whispered, Jane, we can turn this against them. Every move they make is being recorded. We'll expose them legally and publicly and regain control. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. James's escalation was extreme, yes, but it had also revealed weaknesses in his strategy. Suddenly, one of the intruders tried to disable the estate's surveillance system using the laptop. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the lights flickered. Smoke filled the hallway, making it difficult to see. My heart raced. Melissa remained calm. Jane, stay focused. We're prepared for this. The backup systems will prevent access. Follow my lead. Minutes stretched like hours as the intruders struggled with the estate's security measures. Every attempt to break in triggered alarms, recorded footage, and automated responses. Then, the most extreme event yet occurred. A sudden explosion rocked the property. Flames and smoke erupted near the garage, sending debris flying. The intruders were thrown off balance, but the fire spread dangerously close to the main house. I coughed, eyes watering, as the smoke filled the safe room. Melissa grabbed my arm. Jane, evacuate through the tunnel. Now. We moved swiftly, adrenaline surging. The hidden escape tunnel, installed by Jacob years ago, was our lifeline. We ran through it, the smell of smoke thick in the air, alarms blaring around us. Emerging outside, we saw fire trucks arriving, guided by the estate's automated alerts. Emergency responders quickly contained the flames. The intruders were apprehended, some fleeing, others trapped by the automated barriers. Melissa looked at me, her face grim. Jane, this was extreme. He's willing to endanger lives to get what he wants. We've survived, but he won't stop. I nodded, heart pounding. Fear and adrenaline coursed through me, but determination burned brighter. James's personal escalation had reached a new peak, but we had survived and documented everything. Later, as we reviewed the footage and reports, I realized the extent of James's recklessness. His moves were extreme, dangerous, and personal, but the evidence we had gathered was irrefutable. Melissa spoke softly. Jane, the extreme personal threat has passed, but James is still desperate. The next move could be even more dangerous, possibly targeting people you care about or using legal loopholes. We have to anticipate it. I swallowed hard, realizing she was right. James's actions had escalated from greed and public attacks to life-threatening personal intimidation. The stakes were higher than ever. The agent spoke, his voice low but steady. Jane, the intruders were likely acting on James's orders. The next phase may involve attempts to manipulate others in your life, or more extreme public moves. We need to prepare countermeasures and ensure the estate's protection. Melissa nodded. We need to stay vigilant. Every move must be strategic. Every decision calculated. James is reckless, but desperation makes people dangerous. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. The extreme personal threat had shown me the lengths James was willing to go, but it had also revealed weaknesses in his strategy. Through careful planning, vigilance, and the tools Jacob had left, we had survived, and we were ready for the next phase. But deep down, I knew James had one more extreme move left, something even more dangerous than anything he had done so far. As night fell over Houston, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you're safe, Jane? Tomorrow, everything changes. Be ready. Melissa read it over my shoulder, her face grim. Jane, this isn't just a threat. It's a warning. His next move will be extreme and personal. Prepare yourself. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the warning. James's personal escalation had been terrifying, but the message confirmed it. He was planning something even more extreme, something that could change everything. And I realized, with a mixture of fear and determination, that the next day would test every lesson Jacob had taught me, every ounce of strategy, patience, and courage I possessed. The war for Jacob's legacy and for our lives was far from over. Houston's skyline was bathed in the orange glow of late afternoon when the next alert came through. My phone vibrated endlessly, flashing with multiple notifications from the estate's security system. Melissa and I were in the control room, reviewing security footage and assessing potential threats when a live feed showed a startling scene. James had organized a public demonstration directly outside the estate. A crowd had gathered, reporters were filming, and flashing cameras created chaos. Melissa's face darkened. Jane, he's escalated again. This is more than media manipulation. It's a public spectacle designed to humiliate and intimidate. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. James's audacity had reached a new level. This wasn't just about money, reputation, or property. It was about exerting control, sowing fear, and turning public opinion against me. Through the monitors, I could see James standing on a makeshift stage, waving his arms, shouting accusations, and attempting to sway the crowd. The placards around him were filled with fabricated claims about my alleged mismanagement of the estate and Jacob's fortune. Melissa leaned close, her voice steady. Jane, we must stay calm. Panic will only help him. We have the evidence, we have the strategy, and we have the control. This is extreme. Yes, but predictable. I nodded, taking a deep breath. James had always been impulsive, but his desperate moves followed a pattern. Every extreme action carried risks, and this public spectacle was no exception. We activated the estate's secure communication system, broadcasting a live statement to reporters and the crowd. I spoke clearly, deliberately, every word measured. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, everything James is claiming is false. These documents, accusations, and claims are fabricated. The estate's integrity remains intact, protected by contingency plans put in place by Jacob Walker himself. We have recorded evidence of James's actions, proving the truth. The crowd murmured, some turning toward the live feed displayed on large screens outside. Melissa projected images showing James attempting to access the estate's secure documents, triggering alarms, and ultimately failing due to the estate's contingency plans. James's face twisted with frustration, realizing his public manipulation was being countered in real time. He shouted louder, trying to regain control, but his desperation betrayed him. Melissa whispered, Jane remained calm. He's going to escalate further. He always does when cornered. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the edge of the crowd. Someone had thrown a smoke bomb, creating chaos and panic. People screamed, reporters tried to shield their cameras, and James took advantage of the confusion to push forward with his narrative. I felt my pulse quicken. This was the most extreme public escalation yet. The smoke, the panic, the chaos, it was designed to intimidate, confuse, and destabilize. Melissa grabbed my arm. Jane, we can't let this chaos control us. Focus on the plan. We have documentation, cameras, and evidence. Use them. I nodded, steeling myself. Using the estate's remote systems, we activated a live feed showing the intruders inside the estate, caught on camera attempting to access sensitive areas. Security personnel were en route, and the feed displayed real-time intervention by law enforcement. The crowd outside began to turn their attention to the live feed. Murmurs of disbelief spread, and cameras focused on James's desperate attempts to regain control. His extreme actions, once designed to intimidate, were now being exposed publicly. Melissa whispered, Jane, the more extreme he becomes, the more evidence we gather. This is turning against him. I felt a surge of determination. James is reckless. Desperate moves were being documented, creating a record that could protect the estate, the legacy, and our safety. As the smoke cleared, James's frustration reached a peak. He attempted to storm the estate gates, intending to confront us physically. Security barriers held, officers intercepted him, and the intruders were apprehended. Through the monitors, I could see James being restrained, his face a mix of rage and disbelief. The extreme public escalation had backfired spectacularly. Melissa turned to me. Jane, we've survived this phase. He's exposed himself publicly, and we have irrefutable evidence of his recklessness. But he's desperate. The next move could be even more extreme, targeting people or assets we care about. I nodded, my pulse still racing. The public spectacle had been terrifying, but it had also revealed James's overconfidence and desperation. Later, in the quiet of the estate, we reviewed the footage and documents. Every move James had made, every attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or infiltrate had been recorded. We had evidence of his reckless actions, and every escalation had left traces that could be used strategically. Melissa spoke softly, her tone serious. James has reached a peak of public escalation, but desperation doesn't stop at public attacks. His next move will be personal, extreme, and possibly dangerous. We must anticipate it. I swallowed hard, realizing she was right. James's actions had escalated from private intimidation to public spectacle, and now he was likely planning something even more dangerous. The agent joined us, reviewing the footage and contingency plans. Jane, this public escalation has given us a unique advantage. We now have evidence of James's reckless behavior, both publicly and at the estate. But we must remain vigilant. The next move may involve threats to individuals or critical assets. Melissa nodded. We need to ensure everyone in the estate is protected, secure all assets, and anticipate his possible moves. Every decision must be deliberate, strategic, and controlled. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear, determination, and clarity. James's extreme public escalation had been terrifying, but it had also revealed weaknesses. His overconfidence, impulsiveness, and desperation had left him exposed. But I knew this was far from over. James's next move would test everything: our strategy, our courage, and our ability to protect the estate and everyone in it. As night fell over Houston, my phone buzzed with another message from an unknown number. You think you're winning, Jane? Tomorrow, everything changes. Be ready for the final move. Melissa read it and sighed. Jane, he's signaling his next extreme action. This is personal, and it will be dangerous. We need to prepare for everything. I nodded, steeling myself. James's public spectacle had failed, but the warning made it clear. The next move would be the most extreme yet, and it could threaten everything we had fought to protect. And I realized that the final confrontation was approaching, a test of strategy, courage, and resilience that would determine the fate of Jacob's legacy, the estate, and our lives. The war was far from over. The night felt unnaturally quiet over Houston, a deceptive calm hanging over the city. I barely slept, my mind racing with anticipation. Melissa and I had fortified the estate, reviewed contingency plans, and coordinated with law enforcement and private security. Still, the messages from James weighed heavily on me. Tomorrow, everything changes. Be ready for the final move. The warning was chilling. James had escalated publicly and personally. But now it felt as if he was preparing something that would challenge everything we had built, and perhaps even put lives in immediate danger. At dawn, the first signs appeared. The estate's perimeter alarms triggered, not remotely, not by chance, but by someone physically tampering with the outer gates. Through the monitors, I could see shadows moving with alarming precision. These weren't amateurs. They were trained, deliberate, and desperate. Melissa grabbed my arm. Jane, this is it. His final escalation. Be ready. I felt a wave of fear, but it was paired with determination. Jacob's lessons had prepared me for moments like this. Courage, strategy, and patience would guide me through what was coming. Suddenly, the first explosion occurred. A vehicle outside the gates had been rigged to create chaos, detonating just far enough from the house to startle and intimidate, but not destroy the property. Smoke and debris filled the morning air. Security personnel responded immediately, containing the threat, but the intent was clear. James wanted terror, distraction, and a public display of power. Melissa looked at me gravely. Jane, he's moving fast. We have to act calmly and decisively. Through the monitors, I could see multiple intruders moving toward the main house, carrying equipment and attempting to bypass security barriers. Their coordination was precise, but desperation seeped into their actions. They were following orders, but they were reckless. I activated the estate's internal lockdown system. Doors sealed, lights flashed, and hidden cameras captured every movement. Melissa coordinated remotely with security personnel, directing them to intercept and contain the intruders. The first direct confrontation came when an intruder reached the main entrance. He tried to breach the reinforced doors using cutting equipment, sparks flying as alarms blared. Melissa and I watched tensely through the monitors. Jane, she whispered, they're testing us, but we're prepared. Follow my lead. Minutes stretched into eternity as security personnel moved in, containing the intruders before they could access critical areas. One intruder was apprehended near the garage, another trapped by the automated barriers. But James's plan was not yet complete. I realized with growing dread that his final escalation involved more than just property. It was designed to threaten us personally. Through the cameras, I saw one intruder approach the guest house where I and Melissa had been coordinating. I felt my pulse quicken. This was the extreme, personal danger we had been anticipating. Melissa activated the hidden escape tunnel. Jane, we have to move. Now. We ran through the narrow, dimly lit passage, smoke and alarm sirens echoing around us. Emerging outside, we saw security personnel confronting the intruders, some fleeing, others restrained. The chaos was immense, but the contingency plans were holding. We caught our breath briefly, reviewing the live footage on portable monitors. Every move of the intruders was documented, every failed attempt logged, and every dangerous act recorded. Melissa's voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Jane, we survived the first wave, but the most dangerous part is yet to come. James's plan is extreme, calculated, and personal. He's desperate. He will escalate further. I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. Fear, adrenaline, and determination swirled within me. This was a battle of wits, courage, and endurance. Suddenly, the next extreme event unfolded. Through the monitors, I saw James himself arrive, not hidden, not through proxies, but boldly in person, attempting to confront us directly. His face twisted with rage, desperation, and arrogance. He had calculated that the chaos, combined with his public reputation attacks, would intimidate and destabilize us. Melissa whispered sharply, Jane, stay calm. Follow the plan. We activated additional security measures, locking down the estate fully, communicating remotely with law enforcement. Every corridor, every entrance, every vulnerable point was secured. James was bold but reckless, and we had the advantage of preparation. As James attempted to approach the main house, sparks flew from tampered security panels, alarms shrieked, and smoke filled the hallways. He shouted, tried to force access, and gestured wildly at security personnel. But the contingency plans Jacob had left were effective. Every door, every digital lock, every alarm worked precisely. Through the monitors, I saw the intruders James had sent retreating or being apprehended. His plan was collapsing under the weight of his own recklessness. Melissa turned to me. Jane, he's desperate. The next move will likely be emotional, personal, and possibly public. We must anticipate it. He's losing control. I swallowed hard, heart pounding. James had escalated from media attacks to personal intimidation to life-threatening, direct confrontation. And now, seeing him face to face outside the estate, I realized he was dangerously unpredictable. Minutes later, the chaos outside reached a peak. Reporters and bystanders had arrived, drawn by the explosions and alarms. James attempted to manipulate the crowd, shouting accusations, waving falsified documents, trying to regain control over the narrative. Melissa whispered urgently, Jane, stay calm. Focus on the strategy. Document everything. His extreme public escalation is his weakness. I nodded, regaining composure. Using the estate's remote systems, we broadcast a live feed showing James's reckless actions, attempts to breach security, and the immediate intervention by law enforcement. The crowd outside began to turn their attention to the evidence, disbelief spreading as cameras captured his desperation and failure. James's frustration peaked. He shouted, waved, and attempted to physically confront security personnel, but he was contained. The extreme, life-threatening escalation had failed, and he had left clear evidence of his reckless, dangerous behavior. Melissa exhaled slowly. Jane, we've survived the extreme escalation, but he's not finished. His desperation will lead him to another move, possibly targeting people we care about, using legal or public pressure. We must anticipate it. I felt the weight of exhaustion, fear, and determination. James's actions had tested every plan, every precaution, every lesson Jacob had left me. And yet we had survived. As night fell over Houston, I reviewed the footage, the alerts, and the contingency logs. Every move James had made was documented, providing irrefutable evidence of his extreme, reckless, and dangerous behavior. Melissa spoke softly. Jane, the extreme escalation has been managed, but James's desperation means the next move could be more cunning, more personal, and more difficult to anticipate. We must stay vigilant, strategic, and prepared. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The extreme danger had passed for now, but the war was far from over. And deep down, I knew that James's final move, the one he had been building toward, would test everything: our courage, strategy, patience, and resilience before the battle for Jacob's legacy could truly end. The war for control, justice, and safety was not yet over. As night fell over Houston, the estate was eerily quiet, the chaos of the day reduced to flickering alarms and the distant wail of sirens. Melissa and I sat together in the control room, our bodies exhausted, but our minds still alert. Every intrusion, every extreme move James had made had been documented. Every reckless step had left evidence, exposing his desperation and overconfidence. Melissa leaned back, rubbing her temples. Jane, we've survived his most extreme attempt so far. But this isn't over. James has shown he's willing to push boundaries, ethics, law, even personal safety to get what he wants. The final move is coming, and it will test everything you've prepared for. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. The adrenaline from the day still coursed through my veins, but determination burned brighter. James had underestimated me, underestimated our preparation, and most importantly, underestimated my resolve. A sudden alert pinged on the monitor. Another message from an unknown number, its tone cold and deliberate. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Jane. The next chapter will decide everything. Melissa read it over my shoulder, her expression grim. Jane, he's not bluffing. Whatever he's planning next will be personal, extreme, and likely unexpected. Be ready. I felt a chill run down my spine. The day had shown me just how far James would go, and the message confirmed it. The final confrontation was imminent. I leaned back, taking a deep breath, and thought of Jacob. His lessons, his foresight, his meticulous planning. It all led to this moment. I had survived public humiliation, life-threatening attacks, and betrayal from the person I once trusted most. And now, the ultimate test was approaching. The war for Jacob's legacy, for our safety, and for justice itself was about to reach its climax. And deep down, I knew that the next move, James's final desperate act, would be the most dangerous, most extreme, and most revealing of all. The night outside the estate was quiet, almost deceivingly so. But inside, Melissa and I were preparing for the storm we knew was coming. The final confrontation would test courage, strategy, and resilience like never before. And I vowed, no matter what James threw at us, we would survive, and justice would prevail. The morning of the final confrontation dawned clear and bright over Houston, a deceptive calm after weeks of chaos, betrayal, and terror. I stood at the estate's control room window, gazing at the sprawling gardens and the fortified gates. Today, everything would come to a head. Today, James's final move would either succeed or fail, and I would finally take back control. Melissa and the agent were already coordinating the estate's defenses. Every camera feed, every door lock, every security measure had been double-checked. We had documented James's reckless attempts, captured evidence of his lies, and prepared for every contingency. But despite all preparation, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. This is it, Jane, Melissa said softly. Everything leads to today. Be ready for anything. I nodded, feeling the weight of Jacob's wisdom settle over me. His lessons about patience, strategy, and resilience had prepared me for this exact moment. I was ready. The first sign of James's presence came not as a threat, but as a taunt. A drone hovered above the estate, broadcasting a live message to the media. Don't expect a dime from Dad's 101 million. James's voice rang out, sharp and confident. The estate is mine, and Jane can't stop me. Watch and see. Melissa's eyes narrowed. He's desperate, Jane. He's trying to intimidate the world, but this is extreme and reckless. Perfect. I felt a surge of determination. James had underestimated me, underestimated our preparation, and underestimated the consequences of his actions. Through the monitors, we saw his operatives arriving at the estate, black SUVs pulling up with precision. But this time we were ready. Every entrance, every corridor, every vulnerable point had been secured. The intruders moved cautiously, but desperation made them reckless. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the morning calm. James's team had attempted to breach the garage with explosives. Smoke and sparks filled the air, alarms blaring. Security personnel intercepted the intruders immediately, forcing them back. Melissa whispered urgently, "Jane, stay calm. Follow the plan." I activated the estate's final contingency measures. Hidden barriers sealed off critical areas, cameras tracked every movement, and secure safes protected Jacob's most sensitive documents. Every extreme action James took was countered, foiled, and documented. The most daring and personal attack came when James attempted to enter the main house himself. Through the monitors, I watched his face twist with rage and disbelief as the reinforced doors refused to open. He shouted, tried to force access, but the estate held. Melissa leaned close. "Jane, he's reaching the peak of his desperation. This is the moment we've been waiting for." I felt my pulse quicken. Every extreme move James had made, every public spectacle, every act of intimidation, it all led to this moment. Through the estate surveillance system, we guided law enforcement personnel to intercept him. Officers moved swiftly, separating James from his team and securing the property. Every step of his plan, every reckless action had been recorded, leaving no room for denial. James's final attempt to manipulate the crowd outside collapsed spectacularly. Reporters, previously swayed by his theatrics, now witnessed the evidence of his reckless behavior. Cameras broadcasted the footage of intruders being apprehended, explosive devices neutralized, and James himself contained. Melissa turned to me, her face calm but intense. "Jane, this is it. The final extreme has passed, and the evidence is clear. He can no longer manipulate, intimidate, or threaten. Justice is on our side." I nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and triumph. James's greed, recklessness, and desperation had brought him to ruin. Every betrayal, every attempt at intimidation had been foiled by preparation, strategy, and courage. The lawyer arrived later that afternoon, documents in hand. The estate was secure, the intruders apprehended, and James's plans fully exposed. We gathered in the main hall, tension thick in the air. "Jane," the lawyer began, his voice calm but firm, "everything is in order. The evidence of James's actions, combined with his reckless attempts to undermine the estate, has been documented thoroughly. Legally, the estate remains under your control, as Jacob intended." I felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by reflection. James had been my son, my flesh and blood, and yet he had chosen betrayal, greed, and recklessness over family, loyalty, and integrity. Melissa placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jane, you did everything right. You protected the estate, documented the truth, and preserved Jacob's legacy. Justice is served." I looked at James, now restrained and surrounded by law enforcement, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief and anger. For a moment, I felt sorrow for the person he had become. Then I reminded myself of the lesson Jacob had taught me. Courage, patience, and strategy always prevail over recklessness and betrayal. The lawyer continued, reading aloud from the documents Jacob had prepared. "To my beloved wife, Jane, every measure has been taken to ensure the integrity of my estate and the protection of my family. In the event of any attempt to undermine this legacy, the law, evidence, and contingency measures will protect it fully. To my son, James, any attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or threaten will result in immediate legal action and exposure." I felt a lump in my throat as I listened. Jacob had foreseen everything, even the extreme betrayal, and had planned accordingly. His foresight had saved not just the estate, but our lives. James's face turned a deep shade of red. He shouted, pleading, threatening, but the evidence was undeniable. Every extreme act, every reckless move, every betrayal had been documented and preserved. The law was on our side, and the estate remained secure. Melissa whispered, "Jane, it's over. He can't hurt you anymore." I exhaled deeply, letting the tension release from my body. Weeks of fear, stress, and betrayal had brought us to this moment. The estate was safe, justice was served, and James's reckless schemes had unraveled spectacularly. Later that evening, I walked through the gardens of the estate, the sun setting over Houston, casting a warm glow on the property Jacob had built. I felt a mixture of sorrow, relief, and gratitude. Sorrow for the betrayal, relief that justice had been served, and gratitude for Jacob's foresight, Melissa's support, and our resilience. Melissa joined me, handing me a cup of tea. "Jane, you've endured betrayal, heartbreak, and extreme challenges, but you've prevailed. You've shown courage, strategy, and compassion, even in the face of personal danger." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of closure. Yes, and I've learned that kindness, empathy, and patience are stronger than greed, rage, and betrayal. Jacob's legacy isn't just money. It's the wisdom to protect, to endure, and to do what's right. As night fell over Houston, I finally allowed myself to relax. The estate was safe, James's schemes exposed, and the lessons of betrayal and resilience etched deeply into my heart. Justice had been served, but more importantly, I had survived not just the extreme threats, but the heartbreak of betrayal, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The war was over. The estate was secure. And I knew, finally, that courage, strategy, and love would always triumph over greed, recklessness, and betrayal. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to smile. The nightmare had ended. The legacy of Jacob Walker and the triumph of resilience, justice, and wisdom was finally secure.